and welcome to Unfiltered Career Talks with Margaret. Today, I'm very excited to have my boss, Alex Cook, talking about how to deal with being laid off. So Alex actually hired me initially at Typeform. When was it? 2.5 years ago?
2.5 years ago, yes.
Over 2 years ago in any case. And then he hired me at Mixmax. So we've known each other for quite a long time. But before we move on to this topic, Alex, could you just give us a quick overview of your background?
Yes, first of all, Maggie, thanks a lot for having me here today. I'm really happy to be part of this. Just a quick intro to who I am. My name's Alex. I've been in recruitment for over 15 years now. I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been doing agency recruitment, I've done talent acquisition, and today I work at Mixmax as a global head of talent. I'm currently looking after recruitment and the people function. So yes, all very exciting.
Great. So let's talk about the layoffs. So firstly, there have been thousands of people have been laid off this year and last year. I think this year it's been at least 130,000 people who've been laid off. That's in the tech industry, which is crazy. I mean, a lot of these layoffs happened in the US, but also quite a lot of them have happened in Europe. So could you just give us some kind of context, why suddenly all of these people, all of these companies have been letting people go after hiring quite extensively for years?
It's been a very intense year in terms of layoffs. And I think one of the first things we need to do is probably demystify why layoffs have happened, right? Because I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories around it. And I think that in a nutshell, obviously the Ukraine war started, obviously that had its downturn. Europe shut Russia off completely for the obvious reasons. Gas, oil, the basic cost of living went up. And at the same time, over the last couple of years, we've seen, all these startups, getting absurd amounts of funding, looking to 10x their organizations. And all of this, has essentially taken us to a point where we started getting a lot of economic uncertainty. A lot of these companies with big expansion plans started pulling back, thinking, do we really want to go down this route? Do we really want to start expanding, or should we play our cards close to our chest? And then you had VC-backed organizations as well that received a lot of funding and found themselves in a situation where, some of the VC funds were saying, well, we've just given you all this money. What's going to be our return, right? And a lot of these companies at they were 10x in their workforce, but at the same time, their revenue in terms of product wasn't going up, right? So here goes the layoffs, right? So you've got the companies that, aren't looking to, are quitting all the expansion plans. So they're saying, right, we've got all these people. What do we do with them now? Obviously, we cut back. And then you've got the other companies, which, hey, we're way too many people for what our product is actually generating. So what they've done is essentially they bring the cost of people down, right down to where their product is, or how much, in line with what their product revenue is generating. And all of a sudden, you'll find that a lot of these companies at the end of this year all of a sudden become profitable, right? But it's been a very sort of sad situation. I don't think it's forever, because people forget that we also went through the same during COVID times, and COVID, was a period of time. And similar to this recession, right? It's, recession isn't forever. And I think what will happen, and I think this is where I see the light at the end of the tunnel, is essentially that a lot of these companies are going to start growing again, right? And they're going to find themselves in a situation where they've got no recruitment teams. They're going to have to spend a lot of money on agencies, right? And they're going to have to start building their recruitment teams from scratch, right? So again, it's an ongoing will, right? And I think, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I mean, I agree there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because I remember when I was unemployed for 10 months during COVID. And during that time, I actually think it was harder than now, because there were no jobs available. Right now, there are still jobs available. In fact, every day I actually see people finding new jobs. I see the notifications of redundancies, but I actually see quite a lot of people getting new jobs, and also obviously in talent acquisition. And also some of these companies have been hiring at a pace that was not sustainable. And I remember when I actually started working at Mixmax last year, that was the best market I've ever seen in my entire career. So it was great, but I was like, there's no way that's going to last forever. And obviously it didn't. So So what would be your advice for someone who got laid off? Because I've seen so many people who've been laid off, and some of them have been laid off for the second or the third time since the pandemic. So obviously that's a really hard situation to be in. I mean, financially and it's hard on your self-esteem. So what would be your advice for someone who's been laid off recently?
I think, yes, we have seen, I know of cases of people that have been laid off for the second time, right? I think the first thing is I've seen two types of situation, right? One, obviously, if you've been laid off, it's never a nice situation, right? But you can't, fall into that darkness, right? Into that pit where, the world's a very dark place. Why has this happened to me? I think what I would recommend is you start being proactive, right? And I think, you start looking for ways that you can make your CV stand out. I know a lot of people, for example, that have taken this, being laid off for them has been an opportunity to better themselves from a professional standpoint, right? Which has been, looking into different things, getting different certificates. Some people have even gone back to university, right? To study a master's degree, right? But I think it's worth taking a step back, right? Looking at what you've achieved, right? Grabbing all those achievements, right? And looking at your achievements and saying, right, what organizations, looking at my achievements, what organizations can I go and approach, which I know will be interested in my achievements? And at the same time, what else is going inside my industry, right? How can I improve myself professionally to make my profile more desirable? And I've seen a lot of this, and I think it's a route that a lot of people have taken, right? Then there's the other side of it, which people have, obviously have gone into a very depressive status. But I think this is not the correct route to take, right? So I think it's be proactive, start updating your profile, start updating yourself, right? And start finding those gaps in the market, which will be interested in your profile, right? And how you can, and trying to add value to companies in a different way.
So what would be your advice? So how do you add value, right? Because I think a mistake a lot of people make that is they just rely on job boards, or they just rely on the jobs they see on LinkedIn. And if you do that, you're just a commodity. It could be, just one of the recent jobs I've been recruiting for, QA engineer. I think I've received 1,000 applications. It's just literally insane. That was actually very, very unusual. But yeah, what would be your advice on how do you make yourself stand out, and how do you what would that proactive approach look like in practice?
For me, a proactive approach, I recently had a case of a recruiter that approached me. He approached me via LinkedIn, right? Sent me, a message, a very nice message telling me he was available. Obviously, my bad, I never answered that message given that I was very busy at the time. He followed up with another message, sent me his CV, told me a list of his accomplishments, what he'd done, and most importantly, what he could bring to the table, right? Why he was different to the other talent acquisition folk that were looking for jobs. And for me, that's already been proactive, right? Because he could have gone down the route of just sending his CV somewhere. Obviously, I wasn't recruited at the time, but if I was, if I was, he would be someone that I would approach, right? Because he's made the effort of actually going and sort of telling me about his profile and why I would be interested in him. I think relying on a job board, you can go onto LinkedIn and you can see the minute a job is posted now, within hours, it's got 1,000 applications, right? And you'll know that the likelihood of chosen, right, is very slim, right? It's very slim. So I think that's, for me, being proactive. I think the other part of proactivity, and I don't know if this is correct, but I've also, I was speaking to another colleague that's gone down this route, is looking for companies, right? Instead of sort of, sending your email, sending your CV just all over the place, actually approaching those companies that could find your profile interesting, right? Given that, hey, I worked in the SaaS industry for X amount of years, or I worked in the pharma space, or I worked in the industrial space, instead of just farming your CV out to everyone, right? So this is when I talk about proactivity, this is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. And would you actually advise someone tries to find who the hiring manager is? Would you just contact a recruiter? Would you do both?
100%. I think that one of the things that I recently talked about, and I was talking about this in a recruitment meetup. Again, being proactive is number one, find that organization that could find your profile interesting. 2, try and approach. If it's a startup, you're going to have access to a founder or a CEO, right? So tell them how you can help them, right? That you've seen, hey, I've been reading through your webpage, I've checked you out on Crunchbase, I've seen the amount of funding you've got. You could be in a position where you're potentially growing. This is what I've done. This is how I can help you out, etc., right? Definitely approach a hiring manager, definitely approach a recruiter, right? And I think, again, it takes time and it takes effort, but it's much better than just waiting for something to happen.
Definitely. And in fact, I have an article on LinkedIn, I think the title is how to get the hiring manager to respond to you on LinkedIn. I actually have a template that you can use as just as a template, but exactly what you said, showing the research that you've done, that you're not just sending the same message to everyone. And what would be an example of a wrong approach? Obviously, I get a lot of bad approaches daily, but what would be an example of a wrong approach of a job seeker?
There is a lot of wrong approaches.
I know, but let's so what would they be?
I think the wrong approach of a job seeker is, and I think this is a flaw in our industry, but I still see a lot of people demanding, right? Mm-hmm. In our industry, demanding of what they want versus, hey, how can I help you out? Recently, right? One of my colleagues, managed to land a job, right? After being 4 months redundant. Why was he able to land a job, right? And he told me this. He went to an interview, right? And typically, in a lot of interviews, you've interviewed recruiters with me as well, and typically it's what I want, right? And obviously then we go into and we'll talk about salary later on, but in his approach, he went into this interview and said, how can I help you out, right? What part of my experience can I bring to the table, right, that will help you grow or will help you achieve your goals, right? Just with that conversation, he said that the interview turned completely around, right? And the CEO was telling him about all his different problems and everything he had to tackle, and they were coming up with solutions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, after a couple of interviews, he landed that job, right? And he's obviously working there now. But this is what I'm saying, that the wrong approach is to go in there thinking that you're in high demand, because we're not anymore. That's the reality of it. We're not anymore, right? And I think the right approach is go in there a bit more of a humble sort of, go in there being a little bit more humble, right? Don't sort of talk about money. Don't think that you can command massive salaries. Go in there, find out if you can help them, because it could well be that you can't help them. This is way below your skill set or way above your skill set, but at least try and find out how you can help an organization before going in with what I need and what I want.
So yeah, I agree. Being entitled never works. But another thing that doesn't work, since we're on the topic of what doesn't work, is do some research before just spamming recruiters with your CV, because I get so many. Now I am more than happy. I get a lot of emails from random people. If they just ask for advice, honestly, most of the time, I'm more than happy to help and give them some advice, even if I can't help them personally, because I don't recruit in that sector. But the amount of emails I get from random people who I guess they haven't read my profile properly, because they're asking me about jobs in industries I've never, ever worked in. I've never recruited in those industries. So how could I possibly help? So yeah, just do some research first and really just contact the relevant recruiters and show them that you've done some research.
It goes back to, I've been laid off, and, why has this happened to me? And, I wasn't expecting this out of this company. Yeah. Hang on a minute. This is where research also comes into piece when looking for a job. One of the things that I love doing about anywhere that I join is due diligence, right? Go and find out a little bit more about them in terms of, where they are from a financial standpoint, how much, there's a big difference between a company that's still on seed round versus someone that's still a company that's on a Series A round, right? So again, do a little bit of your research, go onto LinkedIn, you can see how much they've been growing over the last couple of years. It gives you an idea of if they're, LinkedIn will tell you if they've had a massive dip. They've obviously had to lay a lot of people off, right? So, and that may have happened a couple of years ago. So I'd be asking the question, why? Right? Because if they've done it once, it could well happen again, right? Absolutely. And obviously in this case, it's a little bit different with the recession and whatnot. But again, research, very important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually also recommend looking at the Glassdoor reviews, because, no company will ever get just positive Glassdoor reviews. And, sometimes the negative criticisms would be justified. Sometimes it's just someone who's just resentful for whatever reason. So you'll always have positive and negative reviews. But if you see a huge amount of negative reviews, that's actually a big red flag as well. And I would be asking about that in the interview, and I would want to see how they address it as well.
100%. And I think, again, this falls part into, instead of just walking into those interviews and, you know, having this entitled attitude about you, I think, again, you can do a little bit of your research, make sure you understand what the organization does, where they're coming from, where they are from a financial point of view, what they've achieved. And then as well, it also allows a clever conversation with the CEO or a founder, right? Or even a chief people officer. At least they know that you've taken the time to read into them.
And just touch on this point, like on one hand, yes, of course, you don't want to go there with an entitled attitude, but at the same time, because you said you want to be humble, you don't want to be too humble either, because I think it can go either way. Because I have seen plenty of people, even like in my recruitment role, you know, they talk about what they've done, but not enough about what they've achieved. And that's why they don't make themselves stand out. So on one hand, yes, you want to be humble, you don't want to be entitled. On the other hand, like that's the opportunity to sell yourself. So that's why, you know, it's super important that you have tangible achievements. You know, how did you add value? Like, how do you measure impact? You know, what actually impact did you make in the first place? I mean, if you don't have this information on your CV or on your resume, you're actually even unlikely to get an interview. You know, just to give you an example, I've received a few hundred applications for a QA engineer position recently. Most candidates, they only had the keywords, experienced in, responsible for. I don't care what you're responsible for. What did you deliver? You know, what initiatives did you work on? So in fact, I would recommend you avoid putting duties included, responsible for. Focus more on what you've achieved, what you've delivered, you know, what you've managed. How did you save time? How did you save money? I know it's not always possible to quantify that in terms of money, but you know, you've made impact in some way, right? Like even if you're in a very junior position, even if you're in an admin role, you know, you might have created a spreadsheet that saved 2 hours of time per week, you know, so that you can absolutely always quantify your experience as well. So finally, we talked about advice for people who've been laid off, but let's just talk briefly about the talent acquisition industry, because we have been really disproportionately affected in these current layoffs. So, you know, I'm super grateful to have a job, but I feel for anyone who doesn't have it right now, because I know how hard it is. So, you know, what would be your advice for someone looking for a job in talent acquisition right now? Because so many thousands of people have been, like literally every single day I see notifications from people who were affected by redundancy, who've been laid off. And, you know, it's sad. And it's like, obviously, yes, the jobs are out there, but there are more people looking than the jobs. You know, I mean, as an example, a friend of mine works for Meta. 800 people have been laid off just in London, and 300 in the UK, maybe not in London. 300 of them are in HR or talent acquisition. So just imagine that's just people from one company, right? Maybe not all of them are looking because they got a payout, but still, it's a lot of people looking for work right now. It's very competitive. So yeah, what would be advice for actual recruiters or HR people looking for work right now?
It's interesting, right? Because two years ago, we were recruiters in talent acquisition. We were essentially the new software engineers, right? We were so high in demand. But I think I actually wrote an article on this around, you know, on LinkedIn around, you know, what the recruitment status was and how to get a job. Like the reality is, right, that 2 years ago, it was impossible to get a recruiter, right? But at the same time, I also saw a lot of people calling themselves a senior recruiter, and they'd only had 2 years worth of experience in the role. And as you said, right? When you went onto an interview with these people or these candidates, you'd ask them, okay, tell me about a tough stakeholder situation, or tell me how you helped a company, you know, plan the geo strategy for talent. And all of a sudden it was just blank, right? It was just, again, keywords in someone's CV, right? Mm-hmm. I think today, what I'm recommending, right, is the tech industry is just one space that we live in, right? Or, you know, or one of the spaces that's been mostly affected. But you know, there's plenty more industries out there, right? I've got friends that have gone into the pharma industry and they've managed to land jobs in talent acquisition. Granted, mm-hmm. It's not SaaS, but hey, it's a completely different industry. You get to learn something completely new. A lot of people have gone into the financial piece as well. Right. I just saw a job come up from HSBC for a global head of talent acquisition. Right. So there's still, you know, in different industries, granted, but there's still jobs out there, right, for people to be had. Now, obviously, if you want to stay in the tech sector, completely different game. And this is when I say that companies are now going to be very picky. Right. And it's important for someone, as you said, to start bringing out, you know, what have I done in these organizations? How have I added value? Right. And this comes down to when I get asked about stakeholder management, have I really, you know, experienced stakeholder management at its fullest, right? Do I understand what a geo strategy is? Do I understand, what a growth plan looks like within a department, etc. Right? So I think, start being humble with what you actually know versus what you don't know, right? Secondly, would be that when you go into an interview, as I said, start listening, right, versus demanding, right? So listen to what the company needs, listen to what they want to achieve, and then that's when you need to start thinking, well, this is how I can help you, right? Salaries have also been a big topic, right? So salaries, we know a couple of years ago, like recruiters with 3 years experience, but some of them were even commanding 6-figure salaries, right?
And some of them were massively overpaid. So yeah.
So it's time to start becoming a little bit more humble with your salary, right? You may not be getting that 6-figure salary. You may be getting below that, but look at it from another point of view. You may actually be getting the opportunity to learn something new, right? So I think diversify, don't stick to one industry. The other industries aren't affected. To start being a little bit more humble with what you know versus what you don't know. Obviously, the salary expectations come in there as well. And the other side is that specialize within one arena. I'm seeing tons of people do this. A lot of the recruiters that I know I was recently speaking to a colleague that I know that has gone into people analytics, right? Mm-hmm. So he's taken his career down people analytics, managed to land a job very quickly. Other people, another girl that I know has gone down the employment branding route. So again, another sort of vertical within talent acquisition. Someone else is specialized in sourcing. So, you can also choose where you want to specialize and also make that your unique selling point. So there's a lot of different things you can do, but I think now you need to diversify. As a talent acquisition person, you need to diversify and you need to find ways that you can make your own profile stand out, right? So that would be, I know it's a bit fluffy, but that's what I would recommend to someone looking for a new job within talent acquisition.
And I would also just add to that even though, okay, so let's say you apply for a job in pharma, yes, there might be other candidates who have pharma experience and you don't. However, if you are the one who have plenty of tangible achievements, I think you're highly likely to get an interview. I know it's never guaranteed because it always depends on who the other candidates are, but if you have those tangible achievements in one industry, I mean, it's still a matrix organization, right? If you work for a big tech company, why couldn't you work for a big pharma company, as an example?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop you. Your skill set is adaptable to other industries, and we're just looking at tech. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of the other industries are actually quite buoyant right now. Yes, right, absolutely. And actually got quite a lot of jobs going. So that's what I'm saying. I think you now, if I was a talent acquisition and a recruiter, I'd be looking to diversify. I'd be looking, as we said, finding a unique approach to those organizations that could be interested in my profile, making sure that I've got different ways of standing out. But as I said, unfortunately, you're one more in a very big pile now, right? So companies are going to be very picky.
Yes, that's the case for now. So that was great. Thank you so much for sharing. I will link your LinkedIn profile below the video as well. So yes, thank you, Alex, for sharing. Thank you everyone for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave any comments under the video. And if you liked it, again, feel free to share the video as well. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you soon on another video. Bye for now.